This painting, The Ladies in Waiting by Diego Velzquez from 1656, seems to be fairly simple at first glance. It's a painting of the painter Velzquez painting on a canvas whose back is turned to us. And in the painting that we can see, there's the Infanta Margaret Teresa being entertained by her ladies in waiting. That's Doña Isabel de Velasco curtsying on the right, Doña Maria Agostina Sarmiento on the left, and also entertained by some dwarfs, Maria Barbola and Nicholas Pertusato, with his foot on the mastiff. Behind them is the Infanta's chaperone, Doña Marcela de Ulloa, with an unidentified attendant. On the stairs at the back of the room is the Queen's Chamberlain, José Nieto Velázquez. In a mirror at the back of the room is an image of King Philip IV and his wife Mariana. But the painting is not only about what we can see. It also raises a lot of questions about what we can't see. Firstly, what's on the canvas that Velázquez is painting? Is it the painting that we see before us, being painted using a large mirror which Velázquez is looking at? Or is he just painting the Infanta and perhaps her group? If he's looking in a large mirror, is Velázquez painting himself in that painting? Are we in front of this mirror? If so, are we in the painting? If so, who are we? Are we reflected in the mirror on the other side of the room? In other words, are we the king or his wife? And who are they or we looking at? Or is the reflection in the mirror at a slight angle, showing what Velázquez is painting on his hidden canvas, namely the king and queen? Generally, larger processes of history don't tell us too much about individual works of art. But there are times, particularly times of dramatic change, when they can't be ignored. One commentator has said that if Versailles epitomizes the French Baroque, then the Paris Salon is Rococo. It's true that over the 18th century there's a rapid shift of power from the centralized state of Louis XIV, the Sun King, who dies in 1715, to the weakened, bankrupt monarchy of Louis XVI and the aristocrats who challenged his taxation of them, and thereby challenged the system that he stood for. And it's also during this period that the ideology of the middle classes, ideas of the Enlightenment, of democracy, of mercantile capitalism, and of constitutional rule of law, are able to emerge, ready for the 1789 revolution. Versailles eloquently expresses the ideology of the Sun King's rule. Its 400-meter facade, a symbol of unquestionable power. So far, we've only examined the Baroque in Catholic areas: Italy, the Spanish Netherlands, the Holy Roman Empire, and France. But the successful gaining of independence by the northern provinces of the Netherlands enabled them to choose the Calvinist religion and for a prosperous middle class to become patrons of art. Artists duly created seascapes and landscapes celebrating the navy and the windmill, both symbols of the Dutch forging their own nation from hostile states or draining land from the sea. Private patrons also led to more secular subjects such as guild members' portraits or domestic interiors. Vermeer's painting of the artist at work celebrates the new role of the artist in the context of the New Republic, represented in a map which covers more than half of the visible wall behind the artist and sitter. The naturalistic style of the painting, the representation of light and colour tones, is likely to have been a result of the use of the camera obscura, which projected an image onto a surface for it to be painted, and which Vermeer used for about half of his paintings. Rembrandt's self-portraits, and there are over 40 of them, not including drawings and etchings, are an artistic phenomenon in themselves, reflecting the artist's troubled life. Artistically, Rembrandt was prolific, producing over 300 paintings, and he was successful, with Prince Hendrik Frederick the Sovereign as one of his patrons. Rembrandt's personal life, however, was darker. His son Rombartus died in 1635, his daughter Cornelia died in 1638, his wife Saskia died in 1642, he lost his art collection and his house to avoid bankruptcy in 1656. His second wife, Hendrikje, died in 1663, and his son Titus died in 1668. When Rembrandt died, he was buried in a pauper's grave. In the early years, Rembrandt's self-portraits are of a self-confident artist, referencing Renaissance masters like Titian, or playfully dressing in costume. But soon after the death of his first wife Saskia, there are no portraits for over a decade, and the portraits after 1652 have an introspection tinged with gloom. And yet, they are still celebrations of Rembrandt's complete mastery of the brush, with virtuoso marks made using the sharp end of the brush to represent a moustache, or white highlights applied with brilliance, a casual dab on the nose, or scumbling on the hair. Rembrandt seems to be saying, I have lost much in life, but I still have this. I still have my talent. There is another strand to the Baroque, a more classical tradition involving, among others, Nicolas Poussin, whose Et in Arcadia Ego from 1638 is a demonstration of a classical geometrical composition. He influenced Charles Lebrun, many of whose paintings decorated Versailles, and this work by Claude Gelée, known as Claude Lorraine, in the National Gallery in London, also depicts a classical landscape, with architecture borrowed from the Pantheon in Rome, with a scene from Virgil's Aeneid. But unlike Poussin's work, the landscape here is the subject. Lorraine travelled early in his career to Italy and was heavily influenced by the Mediterranean light, especially light late in the day. And Lorraine almost exclusively painted classical landscapes, including classical harbour scenes, such as this one. The late 17th and 18th century interest in classicism would pave the way for a post-revolutionary style in France. But the French aristocracy, as it became increasingly independent from the king as economic conditions changed, developed its own style, lighter and more frivolous than the Baroque. Instead of centering on the courtly life, the Rococo style tends to prioritize pleasurable country scenes of aristocrats in festive mood being entertained. The Baroque was a desperate attempt to reinforce legitimacy through a propaganda campaign of art and architecture. The Rococo was the abandonment of that project, to express instead the ideology of an aristocracy. But ultimately, by undermining their own figurehead, they brought about the end of their political power in France.